Okay, I think I'm gonna kick off, and if there's anyone else that's going to join, I can just let them in so I don't have you guys waiting. But let me just open my screen. So first of all, thank you so much for being here today and joining the Female Formula Masterclass. I'm genuinely so excited to present this for a number of reasons. A, because I'm so passionate about women's health. B, I really don't think that it's spoken about enough in the fitness industry. And also, I really think that my story is probably something that you might resonate with now, or maybe somewhere that you have been at some point in your fitness journey. And I do want to start off with being quite raw and vulnerable and sharing my story and what actually got me to be in here. And essentially, it all started off with me coming from a place of zero confidence. I really hated how I looked in clothes. I hated what I seen in the mirror. I had low self-esteem and I was seeking external validation. And I thought that getting smaller, more toned, and achieving my dream body would get me that external approval. And I did what most people do, and I started to follow all the generic fitness and diet advice that I seen online. Following my favorite fitness influencer and copying her I eat in a day and her workouts, and thinking that if I do what she's doing, I'm going to look like her. And you know what? On the outside, it might have looked like I was achieving my dream body. I had the muscle definition, visible abs. I was getting praised for being disciplined, motivated, doing fitness photo shoots, and being asked to work with brands. 2 seconds. But on the other side, while it looked like I was doing everything right, I lost my period. And I'm just not talking about for a month or two. I lost it for 5 freaking years. I was constantly bloated, exhausted, crying myself to sleep with how bad my skin was breaking out, always was thinking about the next meal. And then I would be restricting during the day and then binging at night. And there was so long that I could keep going like this to maintain this lean toned physique until it actually backfired. And then I was feeling inflamed, puffy. I put on excess body fat that I was struggling so hard to shift off. I was burnt out. And the most worrying thing was that I still had no period. And don't get me wrong, like I tried to look for a solution. I went to the doctors, did the scans, did the tests, only to be come back with everything is fine, it's in range, it's normal for an active young woman like you to lose your period. Come back to me when you're trying from a family, or if you're really that bothered, just go back on the pill to kickstart your cycle. And although at the time I didn't have that much knowledge around female health, I knew that that wasn't a solution that I wanted. So I did what the doctors didn't, and I started to look at my health differently, not from a point of trying to manipulate and control my body, but I started to eat to fuel my body. I reduced my training intensity. I worked on my mindset, relationship with food, relationship with my body, and the inner stress. And honestly, hormone healing really just changed my life because I was able to eliminate my bloating. Not only did I regain my period after not having it for 5 years, but now my cycles are regular and predictable. I doubled my energy, cleared my skin, and lost that excess weight that I was holding on to and struggling to shift without falling back into restrictive eating patterns. And not only has this changed my life, but I really feel like my story has such a butterfly effect because now I get to do this for a living and help other women who feel so disconnected from their body, to regain their confidence, to regain control, regulate their periods, eliminate that bloating, double their energy. And today I want to share with you the foundation of all of that. And I want you to come away with knowing why you're not meant to train the same every single day, how to actually use your cycle to maximize your progress, and how to stop fighting against your body and start working with it. So the biggest mistake in the fitness industry is assuming that what works for men is going to work the same for women. And for as long as we remember, we were told to eat less, train harder, be more motivated, fit the same structured routine as men do. But the truth is, women are not smaller men. Men operate on a 24-hour clock. This means that they get a surge in testosterone, which is their main sex hormone, early in the day. And that allows them to hit consistent performance levels, energy, and recovery day after day. Lucky them, right? Women don't operate the same. We operate on a 28-day cycle. We have hormones that ebb and flow throughout the month. And that means that some weeks we feel energized, motivated, coordinated, but other weeks we feel more slower, more fatigued, and more inward. And the thing is, when we ignore that these natural hormone rhythms operate, then we can fall into overtraining during the wrong phases of our cycle, which can then lead to burnout, cycle disruptions, and down the line, hormonal imbalances. We can fall into dieting too aggressively, and that can completely shut off our ovulation. No ovulation, no period, but also other symptoms like low energy and poor recovery. And we can push hard when our body is naturally asking for rest. And then we wonder why we suddenly have these intense cravings, bloating, and mood swings. And to truly maximize not only our progress from our training, but also longevity and health, then we really need to understand what is happening throughout the month. And our cycle is so much more than just a monthly bleed, because it impacts everything from sleep, stress, appetite, energy, and strength. And despite what, the textbooks are saying in terms of the cycle being 28 days, it's going to differ from women to women. And I am going to use the 28-day example just to give you an overview of what is happening across the menstrual cycle. But please note that a normal menstrual cycle falls between 24 to 35 days. So day one of your cycle is your period, and that is menstruation. It typically lasts between 3 to 5 days. Here are your main sex hormones, which are estrogen and progesterone. And I promise not to get too sciencey about this, but if there's anything you'll remember, just remember estrogen and progesterone, because they're going to impact a lot of things. But they're at your lowest, and that might mean that you will feel lower in energy, crampy, tired, less motivated. You may crave rest and comfort food, and it's actually really normal to be less sociable and more inward. As your period ends, you enter follicular phase. This takes up the first half of your cycle. Estrogen is rising, okay? You feel like Beyonce. Your energy is high, your mood is positive, you feel strong, motivated, cravings tend to be lower, and you can manage higher intensity workouts. Then we get to ovulation. This is the middle of your cycle. Estrogen and testosterone are at its peak, so you may feel a surge in energy and confidence. And despite popular belief, your period is not the star of the show, it's ovulation. Because if we're not ovulating, we're not producing a very important hormone, progesterone, which is anti-anxiety and calming. And without it, you may feel more intense PMS, irregular or heavy periods, mood swings, and more intense cravings. And finally, we have what we call the luteal phase. So this is the phase right before your period starts again. Estrogen is dropping, and with that, serotonin drops. So we feel lower in mood. Progesterone is peaking here, and we may also feel a drop in energy and more heavier and slower. Cravings can increase, sleep can be disrupted, and mood swings and irritability can surface. And one of the most common struggles that I see women have is actually navigating changes in appetite and cravings. And when you don't understand what is happening with your hormones, it can really sabotage your progress, or you may feel like you don't have enough willpower, disciplined, and you need to just try harder. So in the first half of your cycle, appetite tends to be typically lower, because estrogen has an appetite suppressant effect. And because energy levels are higher and mood is more stable, we tend to have less cravings and able to stick to a healthy diet. However, in that week leading up to your period, appetite usually increases. There's more intense hunger and cravings, especially for foods that are high in carbs, sugar, or fats. And progesterone increases body temperature. That means that we're burning more calories at rest. So even if you didn't do any extra activity, you are still going to be burning anywhere between 150 to 300 calories extra. So it's no surprise that you're feeling hungry. It's literally your biology. But what can happen is if you don't know and anticipate that increase in energy expenditure, you can fall into a luteal phase panic cycle. So you get this natural increase in hunger and appetite, but because you think that you should be eating in the same way every single day, or maybe that's what my fitness pal told you, or a coach that doesn't understand the female biology, then you're going to try so hard to fight the urge and not lean into that hunger. However, we have a limited amount of willpower. And as we're making decisions throughout the day, then what we're faced at the end of the day is decision fatigue. And while we were able to restrict and fight those cravings at the start of the day, we probably end up just binging and going overboard at the end of the day. Then we feel blame, shame, guilt. And as a response to that, we try to overcorrect through restriction and excessive exercise. And then the time of the month comes again. We have the cravings, the appetite, and we just spin around in circles. So it's the cycle of guilt and overcorrection is what's actually sabotaging our progress, not the increase in appetite itself. So before I move on, can I just get a bit of a response in terms of like, have you ever found yourself fallen into that cycle? Or maybe, you know, if you're a coach that you found that one of your clients struggles with that. If you can just pop in like a 1 in the chat bot, I just want to see where we are at with that. I see thumbs up. Yeah. Yeah. Few ones coming in now with the thumbs up. Yeah, and that just explains that, look, like you're not alone and you're not going crazy if you feel like you just can't control those cravings. We simply haven't been taught on how to navigate through them. And this is exactly what I want to walk through. You know, how can you navigate those cravings and increase in appetite without sabotaging your progress? And the first thing is to shift your expectations. Because right now you might have that belief that you just need to be disciplined and stick to the same calories and macros every single day, but you're not a machine and you're not supposed to operate the same every day. And when you go into it with the expectation that like, hey, I am more hungry because my hormones are shifting, then you stop beating yourself up. And then when you shift your expectations, you can also plan for it. You can simply just start having larger portions. So if, let's say you're having chicken, broccoli, and sweet potato for lunch, if you have like 1 chicken breast, you can have 1.5. If you're having 1 medium sweet potato, you can have 1 large one. It doesn't have to be huge and you don't have to overcomplicate it. But even those small increases in your portion sizes can make such a difference in terms of you feeling more satiated from your meals. If you are tracking calories, you can increase them by 200 to 300 in those 5 days leading up to your period. You are burning those calories anyway, so you are preventing yourself from going overboard by planning for it in advance. Include nutrient-dense, satiating snacks. So instead of just standing in front of your cupboard and picking at snacks while in your head you're saying to yourself you shouldn't be do that, allow yourself to lean into what you are craving, but be smart about it and control it. Portion control is going to allow you to satisfy that craving while still allowing you to progress with your fitness goals. And focus on balanced meals, because blood sugar regulation is so important here. If we're just going to opt for simple carbs, they're going to spike the blood sugar, and what goes up has to come down. So the more balanced you can make your meals, and I love following the PFF formula, which means when you're building your plate, focus on a protein source, healthy fats, and fiber-rich carbohydrates. Another frustration that many women experience along their fitness journey is the scales fluctuating. You may feel like you're doing everything right, eating healthy, hitting the gym, going on your hot girls walks, and then the scale just suddenly jumps up by 3 kg and you're wondering like what is actually going on. And the thing is, the scales is going to fluctuate based in our water because of that hormone we talked about, progesterone. Bloating is more common, digestion often slows down, and all of that contributes to temporary weight increases, okay? Temporary is very important here. Also, because cravings tend to be higher before your period, that can lead to wanting to eat more salty food, and that in itself holds on to more water. But then you might notice, as your period ends, you're feeling lighter, tighter, more energized. Digestion is better, so you have more regular bowel movements, and water retention quickly lower. When you don't understand that, it's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I've gained fat, what I'm doing is not working, I need to restrict more or train harder. And that, just as the cycle I was explaining to you a second ago in terms of the cravings, not leaning into the restriction, but then binging, and that's just going on and on. The same thing can happen in terms of your perception of the scales. It can lead to panic decisions, unnecessary dieting, or falling completely off track. Now, and when we look at the scales, it's really important to understand what the numbers are showing us, because it's not just body fat. What we see on the scales is a combination of, yes, body fat, but also your organs, your muscle weight, and water. And the water component is so important because the hormones impact how much water we hold onto the body, but also what you eat, how you eat, your sleep, your stress levels, your water intake, what time of the day you weigh yourself. So how do we navigate this? Again, it goes back to expectations. Expect the scales to spike in the week leading up to your period. Remind yourself it's not fat and it's just a temporary hormonal response. Also, zoom out. Stop looking at your fitness health journey from such a short-term perspective and realize that even if 1 week you see a jump on the scales, it actually isn't a true reflection of how your overall journey is going. Track trends and not single data points. So track your weight at the same time, same day of each week, and then look at patterns. And instead of comparing week to week, compare phase to phase. So maybe your follicular phase in month 1 versus your follicular phase in month 2. And then also look at the non-scale wins. Because if you ask me, I really think I'm just going to mute this. Yeah, sorry about that. But honestly, I think that the scales are a poor measure of your progress. If you look at them solely, there is so much more to your overall health and well-being. And even if you are getting frustrated with the scales, try and look at other markers of progress, how your clothes are fitting, your strength in the gym, your energy, your confidence. And look, we've talked about the physical and biological changes that are happening throughout the cycle. Your weight will fluctuate from week to week. You will have a natural increase in hunger and appetite. But there's also the psychological changes, because your mood will fluctuate, and that can impact how consistent you are. And that's going to also impact your perception of your body. In the first half of the cycle, high estrogen means elevated mood, higher self-confidence, feeling more attractive and stronger. And because of that, body image often feels more positive. However, in the second half phase of the cycle, especially in the week leading up to your period and during your period, your mood can dip, you're feeling more irritated, energy levels are lower, and as a result, body perception often feels more negative. Again, when we don't understand that body image and our perception of our body will change, we can fall into self-sabotage and we can skip workouts because we don't feel like it, abandon nutrition goals because we feel like we've already failed, get stuck in cycles of guilt, restriction, and then emotional eating, and make more reactive decisions. So how do we navigate through this? And I'm always going to go back to expectations, because when you start to identify patterns, then you can notice these things happening month on month and then have a prediction of what's actually going on. So when does your mood, any energy, body image dip, and how do you normally respond? And then plan for that in advance. Stop wearing clothes that are digging into you and start wearing something more flowy, more softer. Notice how you speak to yourself. If you find yourself falling into a spiral of just picking your body apart, step back and ask yourself, like, how would I speak to my best friend in these situations? And also plan for the things that you do for yourself that make you feel more connected to your body. Maybe it is planning a little bit more of self-care days, and having those planned in advance allows you to prevent falling into that negative body image spiral. Also, separate feelings from facts, okay? Your feelings are totally valid and it's important to address them, but they are not necessarily the truth. So just because you feel bloated or off doesn't actually mean you're off track. And here you can anchor yourself in data points. So if you're keeping track of your progress, have a look at your lifts. Like, how's your gym progress going? How's your sleep? How's your food choices? Because they're going to tell you so much more about how you're progressing than what your mind is telling you, especially in that luteal phase. And learn how to sit with uncomfortable feelings. Sit with the discomfort instead of reacting to it. The urge to binge, restrict, skip the gym, or overtrain often comes from a dysregulated nervous system. And we can regulate ourselves using simple and free tools like journaling, meditation, or intentional pausing before reacting. So let's look at a scenario. For example, you come home from work and Karen has pissed you off. And I apologize if there's any Karens, like I'm just literally plucking a name out of the blue. And the immediate reaction is to go to the sweet cupboard and grab a bar of chocolate. And then you sink into the sofa, you finish it as fast as you can, and temporarily you feel good. It's giving you that comfort. But a couple of minutes later, you literally feel sick and guilty, and you're already planning how you're going to overcompensate for that the following day. But what if instead you came home, you're irritated, you're tired, you're pissed off, and instead of immediately going into the kitchen to grab something to eat, you just put a timer for 10 minutes, and you can actually physically do that on your phone for just 10 minutes. In that meantime, you check in with yourself. You might do a couple of breathing rounds or a guided meditation, go for a long shower, and even after those 10 minutes, even if you do still want to eat something, at least now you're responding and not reacting. You're in control. And I guarantee you that you're going to be a lot more mindful actually consuming whatever you wanted to eat as opposed to reacting to it immediately. And in the long term, work on body neutrality. So there's a whole body positivity movement, and personally, I don't fully agree with it because I don't think that speaking affirmations to the mirror and telling yourself you love your body when you don't is necessarily going to work. And if it works for you, amazing. But the thing is, like, you don't have to love your body every single day, but you can still learn to respect it every day. You can still be appreciative and grateful for what your body does, and you cannot be sad and grateful at the same time, because recognizing that it's such a privilege to be able to even like get out of bed and go to the gym and go for a walk and make your own meal, like, is amazing. And when you start to instill more of that appreciation and gratitude in yourself, you start to be more kind and compassionate. And it takes time, but over time it gets better. So yes, you're going to have bad body image days, everyone does, but the goal isn't to completely get rid of them. The goal is to stop the spiral. And now let's talk about how you can actually maximize your training across the cycle. So, we've learned that there's 4 phases. We've learned that there's hormones that ebb and flow throughout those 4 phases, and they affect everything from your mood, from your energy, from your strength, from your motivation. And you might have seen a lot of cycle syncing trends going around on TikTok or Instagram. People are talking about that you should do this specific exercise in your follicular phase and this specific type of exercises in your luteal phase. Now, I love the fact that we are talking more about female specific training, and syncing your training to your cycle can be incredibly powerful. However, you don't need to throw out your entire training plan. And for a lot of women, cycle syncing to each specific phase can feel so overwhelming, especially if you're already somebody that struggles with consistency. Trying to do a routine, structured training plan, which differs every single week, can be just so confusing and can have a counterproductive impact. However, I do feel that you should be aware of your energy and capacity throughout each phase. So during menstruation, your period, you may experience low energy, cramps, fatigue, and some women feel good training during the period, some don't. Like personally, I actually feel quite good when my period starts. I've seen this shift in my energy, in strength, and motivation. I'm completely wiped those few days leading up to it. But my point is that you need to listen to your body and don't force a rule. You can adapt. You don't need to just stop training. You can lower weights, add more rest in between sets, slower pace, move training days around, or just simply add an extra rest day. If you find that the most difficult time for you is day 1 and day 2 of your period, which I feel like that's 2 days that are the most difficult for women in terms of like cramps, energy, motivation, you can push your training out to say later on in the week. As your period ends, you're heading into follicular, you might start feeling more energized, motivated, strong. I'd recommend just following your usual training program, but lean into that. Like, aim for progression because your body is primed for it. However, something to bear in mind, although your body might be like, yes, let's go, girl, let's push ourselves, risk of injury is high, so prioritize longer warm-ups. Ovulation is quite similar to the follicular phase, where you're feeling more confident, coordinated, powerful. It's a good time to maximize your PBs, push higher intensity, or perhaps try some challenging workouts. And remember, risk of injury is still high. So estrogen comes with a higher risk of injury. So don't skip your warm-ups. And then we have the luteal phase. You might feel slower, heavier, and more fatigued. You don't have to stop training. You don't have to stop running or lifting weights and then suddenly just opt for walking and yoga. If you want to do that, fantastic, up to you. But despite the fact that all you want to do is curl up on the couch, believe me, I want to do that in the week leading up to my period. Exercise is actually fantastic because it helps us elevate our mood. It also helps to balance blood sugar levels, which means we have more control over our appetite and cravings. And in general, it just helps to relieve any like crampy or bloaty feeling that we have. So you can focus on more steady state cardio like your walks. You can still go and follow your training program, but focus more on technique and form as opposed to pushing intensity and PBs and lower volume sessions. So the main takeaway here is you don't need to change your workout routine every single week, but you just need to understand your body and when to push and when to pull back. So that brings me on to something that is hugely important as a woman, especially like if you're an active woman and care about progress in the gym or any training that you're doing, is tracking your cycle. It's actually the most powerful you can use. It will help you understand your body. You'll be able to predict patterns, and then you can personalize your training and nutrition. How to track your cycle? There's different methods. It's individual. You can use apps. I personally really like Stardust. A lot of my clients use Flow. I've also created a cycle tracking chart. If you like access to that, it's a PDF printable version. I can send that over to you. If you want to just type in the textbook their cycle, so I can get your name, or simply a pen and paper, right? Like you can just use pen and paper to see where you are in your cycle and the symptoms, or the notes app on your phone. And in terms of what to track, well, the bare minimum will be when your period starts and ends, right? But if you really want to get in tune with your own body and be able to feel like you're in control and navigate those cravings, increases in hunger, how to manage and adjust your training, then I'd also recommend you track mood and emotions, energy levels, your flow. Is it light, medium, heavy, appetite and cravings, any bloating or retention, and basal body temperature is an optional one. It's a little bit more advanced, but if you're somebody that's unsure if you're ovulating, or maybe you struggle with irregular periods and unsure of whether that ovulation happens, then that's the only way that you're really going to know. So a little bit more advanced, but you can still do it. And this webinar is your starting point, like understanding your body, your cycle, and how to work with it. But like something really important to remember is that no woman is the same and no cycle is going to be the same. Everything from your stress, training history, diet, your lifestyle, your symptoms, like they're all so unique to you. And this is why I've created Hormone Reset Program. Like it's the tools that I've used to literally heal my hormones and heal myself. And inside the program, I help other women understand their own body and cycle on an individual level. I personalize their training and nutrition to suit their hormones and lifestyle. We build sustainable routines that create real lasting results so that these women can feel confident, strong, and fully in sync with their body without restriction and without the overwhelm. And you know what, like if any of what I shared resonated with you, like I would absolutely love to hear your story. And this is a QR code to my Instagram. You can message me at any point. I love just having combos in the DMs. And yeah, let's have a chat. But other than that, like that's everything I wanted to share for today. I know like I tried to pack so much into one, and that just barely scrapes the surface of women's health, but I hope it has given you some insight and just the foundational like level of knowledge. But I do want to open it to like any questions that you might have. So if there's anything that I can help with, just pop your question in the chat box and I'll try to answer in as much detail. Oh, Instagram link. Yeah. Instagram, here you go.